and welcome to County Hall and the meeting of the CFA's Corporate Governance Committee today. And as the usual sort of announcement, I'd like to let you all know that the meeting will be recorded and later streamed to YouTube for viewing after the meeting. And again, as regards to the microphones, can I please ask that you remember to turn them off, etc., when you're not speaking, so that we have a clear run. And of course, the same little note applies to mobiles. If you could have them switched to silent, please. So on the agenda item 1, apologies for absence, I've received apologies from Councillor Harrison. Agenda item 2, to receive declarations. Do any members have declarations pertinent to this afternoon's agenda? I think not. Okay. Agenda item 3 is items which the Chair has decided to take as urgent, and I've not been notified or informed of any items that I would take as urgent. We therefore go to item 4, which is the Chairman's announcements. I've got really no announcements as such because, of course, the general election sort of has condensed lots of things and cancelled lots of meetings. I would, however, say I did attend the carol service of the police and fire service, which was excellent in the cathedral. Agenda item 5 is really to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of November. And here I have to thank Betty for chairing that. In my absence, I was on duty as Chair of Rutland County Council. We had a royal visit that day. We had the Duke of Gloucester in the county, so I was on duty in that area. So can I just ask Betty, would you like to move that the minutes held on the 20th of November taken as read, confirmed and signed? That's fine. Are members content with that? Thank you very much, and thank you again, Betty. So agenda item 6 is our first report of the afternoon. It's the performance monitoring April to November 2019. In our pack, it's pages 11 to 18, and I think the Chief is going to take this one, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I laugh because I was reading through some papers trying to think, well, I seem to be out of sync. We've had a busy morning, only to realise I'm looking at the wrong papers. So, no wonder I couldn't keep up.
Fully understood.
Of course, this particular item paper is something that members will receive regularly from us. We've had recent work in November on future performance reports, and I know we gave a brief update in December's meeting around future performance arrangements and monitoring. But whilst that work is still ongoing, we intend to conclude this financial year with this style of report before we use the new KPIs in the next year's financial year, so that we can use some of those figures as the comparisons, which is what was discussed in November's meeting. So hopefully you won't be sitting there wondering why we're still using an old style, an old reporting framework. As we do with most of these sort of reports, we find that there are certain areas that are improving, others that are not. Invariably, overall performance is about the same, and I think unless you've got any very specific questions, I think the paper is quite self-explanatory. I'm quite happy to take any comments and to try and deal with your thoughts, Chairman.
Right, members. Are there any questions? Betty.
I think the simple answer to that is that we have to look to our other emergency service colleagues, predominantly HEMAS, to pass the calls to us, and that isn't happening now. Clearly, when we started to report on this particular KPI, the the ambulance service were using a different reporting standard and framework, and that changed midway, I think, between 2018 and 19. Their actual internal performance standards changed. After their 8-minute standard went away, their need for support started to diminish. And whilst we still get calls, we haven't changed and adjusted our reporting on the back of the fact that their supply of calls is diminished. So whilst it's a negative, in some respects you'd say it's a bit odd. We want everything to go down in the number of calls, but not for us. This was a particular growth area that we were hoping to develop.
Have you got a... Oh, it is now. Have you got a follow-up comment on that, Betty, or not? Well, members, the report, this type of report, as always, is quite comprehensive, and I think I have to say this committee is particularly good at reading its reports, I've found, over the years. So if there are no other indicators of speaking, then from the chair, we've been asked, the recommendation is, of course, that we're asked to note the performance of the Leicestershire Fire and Rescue Service for the period April to November. So from the chair, I will move that and seek your acceptance of that. Thank you. So we move, therefore, to agenda item 7, which is the Service Development Programme and our plan 1922. It's an update. It's pages 19 to 30, as you see in your agenda packs, and again, I think we're putting the Chief on the spot. Thank you.
Yes, thank you again, Chairman. Members, this again is a regular reported agenda item, gives you a flavour of where we are on our normal reporting schedule against the major projects that we've got. Gives you an indication of some of the complexities of the work that we're dealing with and the variety of issues. I think the most important part of this paper for me in terms of our management team and to support future HMI inspections is page 23 and beyond, which looks at how that work impacts on our planned work and the progress we're making against planned activities in our various directorates and objectives. Again, this is, is as comprehensive as I think most of the papers are. There's lots of detail in here. It would be stupid of me to go through levels of detail. If you've got specific questions, and I'm happy to take them.
Yes, I think as the Chief has said, of course, I mean, as you look at the executive summary, we're talking about 17 projects and against the 26 tasks, and of course Appendix A of our plan, etc., sort of highlights that. So again, are there any burning questions or observations that we would like to make? Sir.
Can I just, the increases on call appliances, you'd come up with new ideas on how to recruit. Is it successful? How are we going?
The project for On-Call is ongoing at the moment, but what we have seen is an improvement of overall performance compared to last year. I think if you recall, there was a period last year where we had dipped below 50% availability. Of course, the trajectory, we would like to be much higher than it is. It is continuing, and I'm pleased that we're sustaining rather than making leaps and then losing things. But to answer your specific question, I haven't got the figures in front of me, but I do know our recruitment of on-call firefighters has been particularly successful. One element I would say to members that the reason why we're able to attract perhaps people for the on-call provision is because in recent years members have approved the fact that we've allowed migration from on-call into whole-time firefighting roles. Now, of course, that's a positive for us as a service because it means we get qualified on-call firefighters who have been in the service, know the business, who can drop into whole-time roles. The downside of that on certainly Councillor Newton's champion of our equalities agenda means that we don't normally get many female firefighters in the on-call provision. We do have more than we've had before, and we're starting to see some of those move through, which is this year is the first year we've had on-call firefighter move straight into whole-time positions. So, but the BME community doesn't really exist outside of the city centre. So we're minded that attracting on-call firefighters through what they may see as a shortcut path to whole-time firefighting roles has some degrees of positivity. Equally, it has to be balanced against our gender equality requirements. And that's something we're very mindful of. I think the question that was asked in the previous meeting around maintaining skill sets because of the changing operating environment in the sector may see us lose a lot of knowledge and understanding, experience, all those sort of things when people decide on their pension changes that they may leave earlier, that we will start to see an increase in the number of recruitable people that we need to fill those vacancies. And that balance between migration and new people off the streets will need to be sort of looked at. And I know certainly from the scrutiny that you give us through the equalities boards that happens.
Chair, can I just remind you...
Ask you, Mr. Kaufman, do you want to follow up?
Well, I was just going to say at Oby and Wigston, 26% of the population is BME, particularly the Oby side of the borough. So I would have thought Oby is a recruiting ground. It doesn't happen because I think there's a retained Indian in Wigston, so that could be a reasonable recruiting ground.
Yeah, I think it's a fair comment, and I accept exactly what you said. When I talk about the on-call, I don't talk about one station. I talk about all of them. Of course, when we get the closest on-call provision to the city is at Wigston. And of course, that gives us the ability to draw down. I think for me, one of the areas, and it's picked up in the State of Fire report, that is more significant is the gender imbalance. And we're still not attracting the level of interest. Even on our last recruitment, which was really, really successful, we had, I think it was 17%, 24%, and I'm looking to my 17 and 27, which is good numbers, but it's not appropriate numbers. So I'll pick up on your point, and to be fair, I don't have the information available, but I'll certainly look at the specifics around the Wigston issue and try and give you some feedback on that.
Councillor Newton and then Councillor Barton. Oh, was it? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were indicating. I'm sorry, Mr. Thuran. It's okay, and then I'll move to your right. Sorry, thank you.
To say, I'm the equalities champion. I hate that word champion, but it's my role within the authority. And I do meet I think it's almost every month. I meet very, very regularly with the equalities officer, and we do try to move forward and reduce that gender gap as well as the gap for the ethnic communities. I would actually sort of encourage everyone here to speak within their own communities. I know the officer works very hard. I couldn't go to a meeting to him yesterday. Was it yesterday, the day before? He actually came over and we sat down. We had a really fruitful meeting about it all. But we need to ensure that every one of us round this table puts an equality hat on when we're out there in our community and try and encourage more women and more people from the ethnic communities to come forward. I know most of them are in Leicester City, but there is in Loughborough, I think it's 4% or more. There are little enclaves from the ethnic communities, and maybe we should try and get in there and do more work with them. Maybe that's something that could be done from Loughborough Fire Station. Thank you.
In terms of trying to reach out, I think we've shown we were awarded by the Asian Fire Service Association for our outreach work and the creativity that our team has for positive action and engagement. So that was a real sort of positive light for Leicestershire Fire on our attempts to broaden the attractiveness of the service to diverser groups.
Forgotten, I should have mentioned it at the main meeting, but sometimes your head gets full of stuff. They actually won an award for the positive action work. 2 firefighters, I think they're both from Loughborough, Richard. I know one is Ronnie. And they actually won an award for all their positive action work, and I think that's a real plus, and I'd love to think that we could build on that. And I wonder if we could send a message from us to them of congratulations.
I was going to suggest that. I think
Thank you.
If we may, we should make a note of Mrs. Newton's recommendation there, because these good things are very often gone unmentioned. It's the words very often. But sir, yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just page 24, paragraph 39. It's about suspicious packages arrived in the headquarters. Is it a first incident or it's happened before, Chair? Thank you.
No, sometimes unfortunately we do find packages arrive and the contents are not what they should be. We had a recent incident, and I can't recall, one of my colleagues may be able to prompt me, that we sent a full response to another service. I think it was someone had sent through some mouldy fruit. So when the package was opened, of course there was a seepage and a terrible smell, which they thought was a sort of chemical substance. Locked down, and like we do at our headquarters, if there is a substance, all of our post is opened in a very secured area. The staff are obviously continually worried if they open something and find they're locked in, but we have procedures that contain it. So I think for me, the fact that we're reporting that we've got this stuff isn't more about what we receive, it's about the fact that our procedures work, that should we find ourselves being the focus of some unwanted attention, then of course we believe we're protecting the majority of individuals. So it's not the first time. I doubt it'll be the last one, but thankfully most of them turn out to be harmless.
Yes, well, of course, there's a that's really good to know, because, of course, as you will all know, there's a very intense system down in the House of Lords, House of Parliament, and again, of course, with the police and ambulance. So we are it's very important that we have a system that protects everyone and all the employees. So good. So members, are there any other questions on this particular paper? If not, the recommendation to this committee, we are being asked to note the progress made since November 19 in delivery of the projects within the Service Development Programme and the tasks, which have been included in our plan 1922. And of course, we will revisit this paper as and when it's appropriate. So from the Chair, I will move that we are noting the recommendations, and if I have your approval, that will be noted. Thank you. So agenda item 8 is the review of key performance indicator reporting. Within your pack again, it's pages 31 to 38, and we're working you hard on the return from your holiday, Chief, so I think you're taking this one as well, unless you've delegated it.
Well, I might take
To
that
the surprise
liberty.
of your,
Yes, to my colleagues.
surprise of your colleagues. Okay.
But
Thank
firstly,
you.
I have to thank members who were involved in the workshops that we took place in November. 4 members and a number of members of this committee were part of that, and I'm particularly grateful for you to spend your time to come in and do this piece of work, so thank you for coming in. And that extends to Mrs. Wright, who isn't a member of this board, but of course a CFA member. My colleague Callum Faint, who's in the room, and my colleague Chris Moyer, who is sitting in the gallery, were at the heart of that workshop. And apart from the content in the paper, I'm not sure, Callum, whether you would like to say anything around where we are with the content and perhaps the development of it, because it is in a development stage, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Chief and Chair. Absolutely right. The Chief's quite correct. About 6 months ago, we approached this committee to start prompting some thoughts, and I'm sure you can still remember that very ugly document that I produced just to provoke some debate. Chris, who sat over in the gallery over there, held the workshop to harvest some of those thoughts, and obviously the outcome of that is presented to you in the paper in front of you. It's not a fait accompli, so if people still would like to see some changes done or different information included, or indeed more information included, we're still very much open to feedback. But we just feel this will give you as a panel and as a committee a more accurate picture of what's going on across the full spectrum of activity from the service, rather than just a simple operational focus. But as I say, if there's anything more you would like to see, please let us know and we'll happily include that.
Okay, while members are thinking about that, any questions that might support it, one of the things I think we've tried to do in here is at the last meetings and the meetings before, where we've had incidents that have led to fatalities, you've asked for information on those and those numbers to be included in reports. So whereas before we were just reporting on a quarter. Clearly you're getting a much longer term view. One of the things I would ask members to be considerate for officers and going forward is if you've got very specific questions around detail and change, if you can give us a lot more notice in advance or not expect us to have the answers on that date, because to be fair, what we did last week I struggle with, let alone what we did last summer. And of course these reports will go back over the 12-month period once we start to progress it.
So, sorry, Councillor Barton.
I'm looking at this document, the performance update. Presume that's included in this report. I was interested in looking at the figures over the months and the variation from month to month, such as a high number of fire incidents in April and May, which then suddenly declines and then rises again, and the same with the road traffic accidents. That there are some months, April and May, where it's in May and June where it's higher, and then a huge number comparatively in November. Are these statistics which occur year to year, or are they random? Like, is there a pattern over several years that you get spikes in those particular months, and why?
I think that's a particularly good question, because I'm not sure. Sometimes it's weather related, sometimes whatever, but let's hear from the experts. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. A little bit of both, if I'm honest. Weather conditions really do affect road traffic collisions and the number of fires we have, as do the weather conditions when they coincide with school holidays. And there are a number of variable factors. So when we had the hot summer in 2018, the number of incidents rose because the conditions allowed it. But equally, you can generally follow some trends in and around the months of the year. So we normally experience higher secondary fires, so that's almost outdoor fires, in the summer months, because the nights are longer, people are out, and actually the conditions support fires a little bit better. So there's some weather factors included, but there's a lot of human dynamics included in it as well. And I don't confess to be a human dynamics specialist, but I know the police will tell you on certain days of the week, if certain football matches are playing, certain crimes will go up and certain crimes will go down. So there really is some human dynamics, but it is also affected by the weather as well.
Is there a follow-up comment? Well, I have to admit, over my years on this committee and on the fire CFA in general, I am concerned at some of a setting of the objectives, because very often they are out of our control. And if you look at secondary fires in the summer, for example, and I hear that, but if it's a particularly wet summer, I guess the match doesn't light, or the actual twigs don't fire, as it were. But if it's particularly dry, then of course it's everything seems to flow, and I don't know how you control that. And I think we almost have to be measured in our sort of monitoring of those performances. But again, sorry, you.
Yeah, Chairman, just to come back up. Sorry,
Councillor Boston.
I was just looking at the numbers again and saw that having taken into account what you just said about summer holidays and so on, there is still a difference between July and then it declines in August when it's still summer, people are still on holiday.
We'd have to probably monitor.
I think in terms of the nature of fire-related incidents, that was the limiting factor of the previous reporting framework, the earlier paper. We tried to provide a commentary that, if we were to bring them all back from the past years, would be it's to do with the weather. It's because of one or two people in the local community who have been particularly vociferous in arson. I think one of the things I would say to this committee here with this style of reporting, and especially now, because I know that they're not included in this figure, but I've been shared the information. The element on page 36, KCI 6, which is staff capacity and availability, our sickness, unfortunately for the last quarter, when it's reported the next time, will show a significant spike. What I can't tell you at the moment is why, but what I can tell you is what that spike led to. So that spike around the Christmas period, and my ACO is looking into this for me, led to us having to provide 25 periods of overtime over what would be a particularly lean period for staff availability. So not only did we have difficulties in trying to deal with sickness absence, but of course there's a consequence and a cost consequence. And over the Christmas periods, of course, they're an expensive consequence as well, and a disruptive one. So, these figures are all indicative on its impact to the organisation's performance. And I think that's why the benefit of having the end column, which gives you the actual numbers and the 3-year averages, which sort of gives you a flavour of, is this really within the sort of normal trends? And I think if you, again, compare this to what you've got in the first paper, it reiterates why previously we reported in a plus or minus 10% factor, because generally they stay within those sort of tolerances. And if you report on a percentage, when there's a change of 1, it could be significant or it could be completely insignificant. I would suggest 1 is pretty insignificant. So it's I think this is a very useful change. How you decide to scrutinise us, we'll have to work with, and maybe we'll have to look at certain elements where we provide more commentary than others, which we probably would just generally say it's to do with the weather, because I think that's too easy. And I'm grateful for the questions that come, but I'm not sure we'll always be able to give you the answers that give you the level of advice that says, well, we've got this under control. Sometimes we just don't.
Are there any other comments? You're looking as though you were going to ask a question, Mr. Kaufman, but no, you're happy. Mr. Pollard, oh yes, Mr. Bentley.
Anything else is the honest answer. So from the Home Office, we have a number of incident categories we have to follow. That's generally primary fires, which is those fires that occur with a insurable loss, such as a house, a car, involves property. Secondary fires are not ones that come from primary fires. They are refuse, outside shrubbery, trees that don't have an insurable loss. And then special services covers pretty much everything else other than the fire-related incidents. So that would include road traffic collisions, floodings, animal rescues, whatever it may be. So it really is a everything else bucket, if I'm honest.
On
Very
that
honest
particular
answer
point,
there. So that's good.
picking up on that point, I think the 1.4, which would be A, B, C, D, F, affecting entry and exit. We've been called to a number of incidents very recently where we've had to support other services gaining entry. Unfortunately, many of those have led to us dealing with deceased people. So, of course, that affects the numbers of fatalities and exposure that our crews go to. So there is a link between some of these metrics that are not always obvious from looking at one line in isolation. And I think it's our job to try and bring those links together, because no doubt where we see an increase in entry, we'll probably see an increase in occupational health support that we need to provide as well. So I think they're not mutually exclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Am I on? Yes, I'm slightly different to the system we have in Rutland, so I'm quid. So, members, then, if there are no more comments or questions, the recommendation before us is that the committee is asked to approve the revised method of reporting performance against the key performance indicators detailed in Appendix A to the report. And as we're being asked to approve, I think I'm going to seek, rather than from the chair, can I seek a proposer and a seconder? Mr. Pollard and, all right, Mr. Pollard and Mr. Bentley. Proposed by Mr. Pollard, seconded by Mr. Bentley. Or everyone in favour with that? Thank you very much. That's good. Just my comment to the Chief, have you delegated this particular paper? And the slight look of surprise takes me back to another life where I used to give technical lectures or training lectures, and if it was on what I termed the graveyard shift, which was immediately after lunch, I would invariably say to the people, absolutely nothing to worry about. I have all the handouts to go with this particular lecture or whatever. But of course, there will be just a little test at the end. And everyone then came to attention, so they paid attention. So it just sparked me back to, as I say, a previous life. So you didn't need to know that, but I felt I would tell you. So Agenda item 9 is really, have we any urgent items? And the answer to that is no. So that takes us nicely, and this is going to be a very quick meeting, but in view of the long day so far, that's not a bad thing. So I really then go to agenda item 10, which is really to remind you that the next meeting of this particular committee is on Wednesday the 11th of March, starting at 2 o'clock, but this time I think it's safe to say we're going to be in Bristol. So it just leaves me really to just say to you members, thank you very much for attending this meeting. Very prompt, very efficient, and I wish you all a safe journey home. Thank you.